Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we're getting into our second installment of our food movie festival with 2007's Ratatouille.
Anyone can podcast. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see / hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people what?
Find good media.
That is right. We do festivals.
Yeah, we do 101s. We do scene analysis. So please join us. We got hundreds of episodes.
Yep.
Go to our backlog. Go through the festivals. Keep up with everything.
Punishment reviews.
Yeah.
All sorts of things.
Anywhere you listen to a podcast, YouTube is a big one there. So if you're there, hit the bell icon, do all that stuff. All the likes and subscribes and whatever else is.
That's right. Second installment of the Food Movie Festival.
There's starting to become some themes here that we're seeing that are related to all of these food movies.
This movie has some weirdly dead-on comparisons to Chef.
Yeah. Chef was
not a ton of them, but there's a handful where I was like, huh. That's weird.
The critic.
Definitely the film critic. Definitely some of those.
Not a film critic, food critic.
Food critic.
We're the film critics.
We're the film critics, yeah. And neither one of us, I think, are as big of douchebags as either one of the food critics in our movies that we've seen.
Well, Ego here is great.
Oh, he's fantastic. He's one of the very first faces that we see.
That's right.
I will say this right out of the gates. Rewatching this again, I was struck by how much this didn't feel like a computer animated movie. It just felt like an animated movie. Yeah. And secondly, how much this didn't feel like a Pixar film.
I have two words for you.
Brad Bird. I know. I totally agree. And I think, the other thing that happens a lot is in Pixar movies, with the exception, I would say, you've probably seen way more of them than I have having kids, but, with the exception of Toy Story, it's very rare that Pixar movies put an actor, like the voice of an actor, as the front and center thing. They usually try to hide it to some degree, right? Like, I think a lot of times you're like, oh, yeah, it's this person who is someone that's a famous actor, but we've hidden that. And here they really put Patton Oswalt front and center as being the most important kind of part of the film.
It's so funny you say that because, there is some, you kind of can, it's just one of those stories that's like something you've seen before probably, but it's just like that much different.
Yeah.
That it's that much more special. And it is Brad Bird. But, they take a lot of Disney tropes and kind of twist them around a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because normally Remy would be the sidekick, right?
Totally.
And he's not. He's the main character. Linguini is the sidekick here. And so the Talking Animal movie doesn't usually do that, right?
And technically, according to the humans, there are no talking animals. That is one of the most special parts about this movie that makes it work the most because when we get Patton Oswalt doing Patton Oswalt, it's perfect because God, he's so good at telling these kinds of stories and being a nerd. And in real life, he is this music and movie and comic book nerd.
And food.
And here, and he is a foodie, definitely Patton Oswalt is. But here, that level of nerdity for Remy is perfect. But then when it becomes more Linguini's story, we just stick with the visuals of Remy, who is the cutest fucking thing on the planet. And if it was Patton Oswalt talking to Linguini, it'd be weird. It just wouldn't work. And so instead, seeing the mouse pantomiming and doing these little things is so cute.
They somehow keep the magic of that by That's a great point. Yeah, that is the one disconnect. That's one I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, if he was like, talking rat, you'd be like, okay, this movie's okay.
So he communicates, but it's more with his face and his eyes.
And he's calling him like, okay, little chef. Like, it's so damn cute. And so the movie kind of gets to have it both ways. It gets to be silly and have Patton Oswalt be the voice of our main hero and do these kind of not not breaking the fourth wall the way that a movie like Shrek does, but still having more sophisticated jokes where you're like, oh, that feels like a Patton Oswalt ad lib.
Sure.
Right? And then it gets to switch it up and be this adorable movie.
I think Brad Bird is probably a pretty strict, he seems to have...
He has a vision.
Yeah, he knows what he wants. Like Iron Giant, to me, is one of my favorite animated movies.
It's a
of all
perfect
time.
film.
It's really.
I will say it here.
It absolutely is. And I love that Pixar brought him into the world, and he understood he got it. He got John Lasseter and Pete Docter and all those guys. Yeah. They would probably be up there for Pixar's best directors, but for me, it's Brad Bird because the ones that he ends up doing, I'm always.
He also did The Incredibles, right? Yeah. And you're right. It's so funny that you're like, I have two words for you, because I do think the other thing I really noticed is it looks different than any other Pixar film. And it's interesting because apparently where most other Pixar films, your Toy Stories, stuff like this, Inside Out, they would do a lot of mocap, right? They would do a lot of, and whether that be rigs that they already had that they'd used before of reference points for motion capture of somebody rubbing their face or something like that.
Not back in 2007 though.
Well, no, apparently they were. They had a lot of those rigs. No. Oh. On other previous Pixar movies before this.
Oh, interesting.
And Bird said, I want this thing animated. I want this thing animated by hand. I don't care if it means that
hand drawn.
You're doing it with a mouse, but at the end of the day, we're going to do this like a real animation. And you can tell, and it looks, not just because it's French, but it looks a lot like Triplets of Belleville to me.
I could see that.
Just the weird also shapes of people and
being in Paris maybe helps that a little bit.
That's what I said. I mean, there's definitely that aspect, but I mean, you take the what is Gustavo or what was
Gusto?
Gusto. That character looks like he walked right out of Triplets of Belleville.
Yeah, for sure.
He looks like a teardrop.
Brad Garrett, the guy from Everyone Loves Raymond.
Garrett, I think. Yeah.
If you didn't know what this movie was about, and I was like, dude, you have to see this movie.
Wow. Okay.
It's about
what's it
a rat chef that helps a dumbwitted heiress to learn to cook and manage a famous French restaurant. Does that sound like a good movie?
No. No, it doesn't. It seems like, when you say it like that, I just picture the version of Ratatouille that's in Everything Everywhere All the Time.
Yeah.
Isn't it a raccoon in that one?
Right.
It's a raccoon. And
forgot that they're back to that.
And they're at a Benihana. He's like a Benihana chef with a raccoon that's in there.
Totally forgot about it.
I was thinking about that the whole time I was watching it again. I was like, at what point did the Daniels go, you know what we need? You know what this movie needs?
Yeah.
Ratatouille. In the middle of it.
Just throw
Ratatouille in the middle.
It is.
No, yeah, that you're right. That idea as a film doesn't make any sense. But then when you
just hearing the pitch for this movie, then you're just what?
And then you go, but what it's actually about is it's the
passion, the art.
Well, it's the person who's good at a thing that which feels so well-worn territory. It feels like something from, you remember those golden books that you'd have as a little kid where it was
the golden stripe up the
and it was always a book. It was always a book about a bear that didn't want to eat honey. It was always about
Winnie the Pooh.
Well, no, but I'm saying this iconoclast that's usually an animal that doesn't do the thing that all the other ones do or likes a thing that they're not supposed to like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so having a rat, in this place where technically rats, if they go into kitchens, they get killed and all he wants to do is cook. And he's the best at it, right?
He's got an elevated sense of taste and smell.
And I love the way that it shows what his taste of
and there's Bird in the animations, making this a dreamlike state when he's thinking and talking about
this
food
60s surrealist looking
when Dumbo, has a drug.
Oh yeah,
drug
the pink elephant.
Yeah, it looks like it was kind of trippy like that in that way. Anyway, so but just his passion, just the way Patton is talking about it, and his passion for what it gets him excited and the nutty smokiness or, just all the things.
Lightning-y.
And trying to explain it to Emerald, I think is the brother here who is eating garbage. She's like, what are you eating? He's like, I don't know.
I actually don't know. It's those moments that I feel like that extra level of humor is really great. But you're right. It's like he doesn't have anybody he can talk to. And his dad, is the gruff, like.
Do you know who the voice
not supportive dad? Oh, I do. Who is it?
Brian Dennehy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That has to be based upon, because Patton Oswalt had all these early stand-up jokes about Brian Dennehy. Yeah. I would not be surprised at all if he was the one that went to Brad Bird and was like, we got to get Dennehy.
No one said that in a while.
Character actors. Who gives a fuck if we're fat? That's right. The bit. That's the joke. That's the Oswalt bit. I remember reading interviews with Patton Oswalt, and he was like, when they were making this movie, he was like, I was really nervous. He's like, because he's like, when I was on King of Queens and I was doing my stand-up stuff, he's like, I would have people that were really upset when they would come and see me do stand-up, because they loved this character that I did from this super middle of the road, like
sitcom, laugh track,
and just like the safest jokes ever. And then if you don't know Patton Oswalt stand-up, like, it's wild. I mean, it's hilarious, but it is like,
oh yeah,
out there, right? I mean, it is dark and it is dirty and it's hilarious. But then he was like, all of a sudden, like, they're telling me, oh, here's your upcoming PR tour. And he's like, it's fucking Nickelodeon. It's like kid reporters, like, so how long have you been doing voice acting? And he's like, and I'm thinking about the fact that this is the biggest thing I've ever done. And he's like, and my two worlds are colliding in this way, where he's like, am I going to get like canceled? Like when somebody's like, actually, this guy's a total fucking creep. Listen to this stand-up bit that he did, Yeah. And he was like, it kept me up at nights a couple of times. And I had to like talk to the people at Pixar, like, you've heard my other stuff, right? And they were like, no, that's why we brought you on. But he was like, it kind of freaked me out for a minute. And it makes sense, right? Because like, if you don't exist in that sort of world of like children's entertainment, and all of a sudden you get a gig doing that, you are like, you've heard my records, right?
It's true. I don't know why they necessarily chose him. He did great. Honestly, all the voice acting here is great. But his whole perception of life as this rat, life is hard. No one understands me, which obviously human traits that you don't usually in the talking animal movies have that many relatable things, right? But you're inside of it with them, and the dad's never impressed, and it's all about the family, right? We get to see how much family is here.
Yeah, we got to stick together,
and
right?
That scene where the chandelier comes down. And there's that like quiet 2 or 3 seconds where they all just look at each other, and there's like 1,000 eyes.
Because at that point, we don't really know where the rest of them are at. Like we haven't made the association yet. And like, I didn't even think that they were necessarily in the house anywhere. Yeah. I thought they were maybe in a
log outside.
Yeah, something. And so like, he's like, no, you'll take them back to the, I can't remember what he called it.
No one goes into the kitchen.
Yeah. And she is so shocked to see a rat.
Yeah.
That when she shoots and then looks and she's made that like star of all of them, and then the ceiling falls, you're just like, it is
worst nightmare in the homeowner.
300 rats. And they're all like, scatter, like, and I love this miniature world where they're like, get to the boats, and there's like these boats that they've built. That again feels very Brad Bird. That feels like sort of where there's a tiny world and then the bigger world.
Well, and his worlds collide here because he creates this secret life, right? Because he's sneaking in, he's watching Gusteau, he's getting inspired.
He's read the book. He's like, wait, you read? And he's like, well, I mean, not all the time.
Yeah, but he's like, wait, you can read? You're a rat. How did you learn how to read?
And I love that it isn't
smelling the spices. And
it's not this thing that he is somehow magical. His interests are just different, right? Like, it's not that a rat can't read. It's more that a rat's like, well, why would I? Like, why the hell would I care what humans think? And he's like, well, because there was this amazing chef, and like,
there's this passion.
Yeah. And like, they're like me. Now, what's interesting is to your point, and, obviously Pixar is an offshoot of Disney, but in your classic Disney movies, we always have a character's "I want" song, right? Where they kind of lay out Like, I'm Belle, the baker always has the same bread every day. It's so boring, right? And so it kind of stakes this claim about what the world is going to be like. And even though this isn't a musical, we get that very much with Remy in this beginning, where he's like, nobody here understands me. Mm-hmm. Now, it's because of chance that he ends up going to Paris, but really...
Is it though?
That's the thing, is that it is his fault that he gets left behind because he saves the book, right? Like, everyone else is like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And he's like, oh my God, I have to take this cookbook, right?
Technically, it's the lady's fault because she turned on the cooking channel and he started watching Gusteau.
See, there you go. That's what it's her fault to begin with. So, but what's interesting is our second main character, we never get any motivation for why Linguini wants anything. Like, all we know is Linguini is tired of being a fuck up, right? That's it. And then later he falls in love. And that is, don't you think that's so unusual for this kind of a movie that usually fits a single mold, right? Like, Linguini should want something. Linguini should know that he is the great grandson of Gusteau.
Too dim-witted.
But he doesn't know. Well, and nobody really knows. It's only his mom. I guess his mom knows and sends the letter to Skinner. Mm-hmm. And so that creates our secondary layer of conflict. But in a more practical movie, Linguini would show up there knowing it and being like, oh man, I can't do anything right. I'm even the grandson of the great Gusteau, and I don't know how to cook.
He doesn't have the pressure of like this family history.
Yeah, he has no agency.
Yeah.
Like, his agency is just like, I don't want to just be the garbage boy.
Yeah. And he basically, his mom says, give him a job.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're like, fine, he'll be the garbage boy. And then he's just a puppet. He's a puppet for... I mean, he's sweet, and he lets...
He's cartoonishly stupid.
Yeah, and he lets the fame get to him, but only for a half a second. Like, these things that would normally be the huge plot points.
Remy has those plot points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But our human characters really don't. Like, not in the same way, right? In fact, the two characters who have a much bigger arc are Colette, mm-hmm. Who decides to come back, mm-hmm. right? And then Ego, weirdly enough. Like, Ego probably gets, next to Remy, Ego, the critic, gets probably the biggest character arc of...
That's true.
Of any human in the movie.
True, and it's like 2 minutes. That's funny, yeah. The bad guy.
More about him. Yeah.
You know, the bad guy in these movies, and I talked about this last week, but just the low stakes of movies like this, where we're talking about a meal here. If someone gets food poisoning or something, like, that's worse. A bad write-up.
I mean, I guess in this one, Remy could get killed. Right, that's the threat, is that people.
The health inspector did get tossed in he got taken hostage. So
we'll get to all that stuff, because that's some of the best visual gags in the movie at the end of this thing.
Anyways, but the idea of Ego, and he's someone who could take down your restaurant with one swipe of the pen or whatever it is, and that's really the biggest threat we're talking about here. And so it's an easy movie,
There is a secondary threat that I think is really interesting, which comes from Skinner, which is played brilliantly by Ian Holm.
Oh, so good.
I didn't know that Ian Holm could do a French accent. A French accent.
Speaking of accidents.
I didn't know that Ian Holm could do a French accent like that. Like, it's so funny.
He's amazing, but
so great.
If you're really going there, Janine Garofalo as Colette. Oh my God.
I know. Well, she's about the cutest thing on the damn planet as that character. It's so good.
But she's she's got it down. She nailed it.
Yeah, I know. If you had just told me that was a French actress, I would have believed you. But Ian Holm here is Skinner, who I wrote down, he ends up having this almost Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched vibe, where like, what? Like, and he's talking to a rat. You know what I mean? It's like, it becomes this like running gag for quite a while that he sees the rat and then he turns and he doesn't see the rat, and it's like, it's driving him crazy. But just a really, really funny character. And I love this secondary threat where greed is destroying the reputation that Gusteau had when he was alive, where it's like they've got this photoshopped cardboard cutout marquee of him.
Just every kind of food.
Yeah, like dressed up, in a bandolero thing to sell frozen burritos. Like it's like the death of the honest character in there. And the Ego, was just like, oh yeah, like that not like, first of all, like Cousteau is great. I don't agree with him with all this BS about anyone can cook. Totally not true. But then beyond that, like when he died, the restaurant died with him, you know, and he was right. I mean, it really was all being phoned in by this crew that all meant well, but like, you know, nobody's like, it is the same restaurant from Chef.
It is, right? I told you.
You have Ian Holm, and then you have Dustin Hoffman, and both of them are like, play the hits, right? Like, we are a moneymaker. This is not about experimentation.
They also both invest at the end.
I know.
So
I know.
Pretty interesting. I just love, you know, at a certain point, you just kind of forget that it's a rat, right? It's just Remy living his dream.
Yeah.
And so you get wrapped up into that where you don't even think about like, oh, you know, even at the beginning, he's washing his hands and he's like, I don't want every plate.
He's like, if Dad sees you walking like that, and then later, like when he's commanding all of the rats that are in there, he's like, food handlers walk on 2 feet, you know. And I was like, what a great little detail.
Yeah. Oh yeah, him running you know, that scene is him in his prime. Like that's him like in his element, like doing everything, directing a kitchen, living his dream. And it's really fun. Now let's talk a little bit about them trying to figure out how to puppeteer Linguini here. Because
pulling on the hair, and
it's absurd. Yeah. Completely absurd. I mean, this movie's absurd at its core.
You have to own it. You just have to own it right out of the gates.
Cook.
Yep.
Let's go for it. Right.
Yep.
But this, to your point earlier, is not magical Disney stuff, right? This is different than that. It's only something that you can do in an animated movie. You couldn't pull this off. We couldn't see a live action remake of Ratatouille.
I mean, we did again in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I guess you're right.
But it looked as insane as you would think that it was going to.
Good point. Touche. Yeah.
It's more terrifying than it is cute in real life. Yes. Let's say that. But yeah, you're right. There is this like cartoon logic of, you know, and he has him put on the blindfold. And I love this like training montage where he's like, okay, you know.
Oh, they're like spilling the wine.
Well, he has the same attitude the audience does with the first time that he like pulls out a big knife, you know, and you're like, whoa, I don't know if we're ready for this yet. And he's cutting everything. And it's not like we create a gimmick and then forget it once we've explained it, which again, a lesser movie would have done. It's a gimmick, and we continue to lean into it till the very last scene. He's holding food up to smell or look at it, and everyone else is like, what the hell's going on, you know? And you go, yeah, like it's very consistent in its vision that way.
Yeah, and just the whole them trying to figure out it's on his head, and just him being inside, and he's like,
yeah.
And I the look on his face when he tears it open, tears his shirt
and looks at his own chest.
Exactly what I would have if that rat was crawling through my.
I mean, that's the other thing that we haven't really mentioned here is that this movie is incredibly funny.
It is.
It's as charming. It's as funny as it is charming, right? Like there are these like beautiful, charming moments. Again, just watching the little rat, like watching Remy like sit and thinking about it. I mean, it sounds so corny because it totally sounds like you know, Fievel Goes West or whatever. But again, you know, you have this little mouse and he's like sitting and he's like looking out at the Eiffel Tower and he's like, wow, you know, and you're like, he is a country mouse that's now in the big city. And like, it's an infectious vibe that like it just fills you with love,
but,
you know?
Absolutely. But he does put blinders on, you know, because he gets so caught up in following his dream that he doesn't really consider, you know, in the kind of the twist in the second act is that his family comes back and they're like, hey, can we have some food?
Yeah, totally. You work in a kitchen?
Yeah. And all this stuff. And, you know, I think the best part of this movie, outside of the animation and the voice acting and all that stuff, but like the best story element or character development part of this is when Remy talks to Cousteau, who is a figment of his imagination.
Yes, I love this stuff. Yeah.
You know, and, you know, he saved the book, and that's how he starts talking once he starts going down. That's when he starts going crazy or whatever you want to say he's doing. It's changing into this other person. But, you know, they really play with that idea, especially when they open the letter and find out that he's actually the heir and everything. And he's like, I don't know. I'm a figment of your imagination.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know I had a son. I have a son.
Yeah.
You know, and like.
It is true that you're like, he's basically just talking to himself.
Yeah.
But it's all these
play with it, and it's great.
Well, and it's that thing that artists need, which is it's that positive self-talk.
Yeah.
And in brain, it is his idol, his
hero,
his mentor, an official mentor that is talking to him. But really, it's him encouraging himself and saying, like, you're actually good at this thing, right? And I gotta say, I love these moments. There's two of them that happen, and it's right towards the end of the movie here. And both of them are these like Hail Mary moments. And the first one turns out one way and the second one turns out the opposite way, but it's Linguini holding out Remy and being like, this is who can cook. And the first time around,
this is to his staff.
Yeah. You're like, oh shit, like that's something that never actually happens in the movie. Like they keep it a secret, forever. You don't actually have a character be like, it's the rat that's doing it, right? And this movie does, and the reaction is exactly what you think. Everybody quits. They're like, I can't work for a lunatic, right?
Well, it's funny because the way they set that story up, she's, once he inherits everything and it's his now and he's in charge, he gets big britches pretty fast. And gets into himself, and she's like, okay, you need to inspire the kitchen. And multiple times he's trying to inspire people, and he's just so
terrible at it. Yeah.
So painfully awkward. And so, that scene that you're talking about is his best monologue of the whole movie. It's inspiring because Remy's inspired him.
Yep.
And he's feeling that. He's championing Remy here and knows what he can do.
Yep.
And so you think it's going to inspire the whole kitchen.
And instead it's very realistic, which is everyone's like, fuck that. And they leave,
Yeah.
Now the second time it happens at the very end of the movie, he does the same thing to Ego. Mm-hmm. And it was such a great choice that at that moment, when the stakes are at their highest, the end of the movie is 2 back-to-back monologues.
It's true.
The first one is Patton Oswalt, who, again, the man knows how to tell a story,
yes,
like he has it in his bones. And so there's that. And then nestled within that is another guy who has an amazing voice for monologues, Peter O'Toole.
Of course.
Doing the sweetest review.
Don't you dare.
It's so... When he... Like, it was heartbreaking when he's like... It's like sometimes we need new, but it's hard to be new. And he's like, and new is scary. And he says, and this is the line that like broke my heart. He goes,
the writing's beautiful.
New needs friends. And I was like, oh my God, new needs friends. Like that is, and it made me think like, boy, Ratatouille is about a little rat that's pulling hair and like making a guy cook. But it's also about like what it means to be an outsider in something. And to feel like, literally, for all intent and purpose, this is not for you. But you're like, well, then what the fuck else am I supposed to do with my life? Because it's all I want to do.
A very similar scene happens with his dad, where he's just like, you can't change nature. He's like, but change is nature.
Yeah, that's what this is. I believe this. Yeah. And so, like, that new needs friends, I was like, oh my God, that is like... poetry, And I just thought, like, again, like how poignant for this movie about a talking rat.
To your point earlier of Ego having the biggest kind of flashback, they do the zoom in on the eye and he immediately remembers his childhood.
Yeah.
Eating ratatouille the way his mom made it.
Because his knee was scraped up.
And having this like instant reaction with that taste.
Yeah. Total recall.
It's a nostalgia recall, right? And so he immediately did it, and it also makes him remember why he loved food in the first place.
Well, and I wonder, now that we're talking about this, when Remy pulls it out of the recipe and holds it up, Colette goes, Ratatouille? And she kind of crinkles her nose and she goes, that's peasant food. And again, thinking about this idea of outsiders wanting to be a part of something, when we go back into Ego's past, it is a little farmhouse just like the one that Remy lived in before he moved to Paris. And so you go, this idea of being an outsider and then, potentially growing up to become snooty, elitists. I mean, again, I talked about this a little bit when we were doing Chef, but if you've seen the movie The Menu, there's a lot of themes that are also about that in the menu, right? About this idea of like where you start out from and where you end up and all the bullshit along the way. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk more about this when we do Pig too. Like it is an ongoing theme of like why a person starts down a road of a particular art form and how jaded they become along the way and how they become the gatekeeper, the arbiter for who's allowed into it and who isn't. And this idea of new needs friends and like opening those doors and allowing more people in who normally we wouldn't.
Every aspect of art has that and needs that.
Yeah.
Right? It has the gatekeepers and it has the people that are trying to break in to do something else.
Yeah. And it needs,
obviously,
it needs more champions that are saying, open those doors wider, like let more people in to tell more stories. And it's just funny because it's like, now that we're discussing it, I'm like, whoa, this shit's deep, dude.
I was going to say, damn you, Brad Bird, for how did you do this with fucking
with like
puppet.
A rabbit fit
movie.
And yet it's about these really deep themes about like who's allowed and not allowed to make art.
Awesome. What a beautiful movie. Beautifully animated, beautifully acted, beautifully told, but just like such a breath of fresh air.
And a total like rainy day movie.
Oh,
where you just like put it on
anytime. Yeah. One of my favorite Pixar ones.
Yep.
And just damn you, Brad Bird. Just,
I know.
Great job.
Knows what he's doing.
All right. Thank you very much. That is the second installment of our Food Movie Festival. We are going to continue, like you said, with Pig, and then we are going to do Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yep.
And then we have Big Night as our forgotten gem. Can't wait to talk about that one.
But next week we will be doing another That One scene. This is the Gollum Smeagol scene from The Two Towers. So please stay tuned for that.
Ever talked about Lord of the Rings on the show, if you can believe it. All right.
All right. Well, like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week.